I'd be interested to know about, and we certainly know that there's an expectation among certain people in England that Australia will eventually become a republic in the next few years. Whether we're able to still remain part of the Commonwealth or not, I don't know whether that is a condition of whether you are or aren't, but it feels to me that King Charles understands that the greatest power is no longer the empire, it is this collection of nations, this pretty unique band of nations, from the poorest to some of the richest, to the most developed to the underdeveloped, and it feels to me that that is what binds us as much as systems of government now.
Yeah, look, I mean, whatever Australia decides, it may decide to stay with the monarchy, it may decide to become a dreary republic. That's entirely up to you to make that decision. Not, of course, that I'd attempt to influence the debate in any way at all, you fully understand.
Of course, I appreciate it.
But whatever happens, of course, Australia will be a member of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is this big club of nations. We speak English, we have shared histories together, we've been through triumphs and disasters together, all of us. Common law applies in almost all of those countries. We have our sporting competitions and all the rest of it. There's so much more, I think, that we could do with it. But I also have to say, aside from the Commonwealth, the very fact that there is your Prime Minister, Albanese, in San Diego, with Joe Biden, with Rishi Sunak, and that there is much more, I think, of a coming together between Australia and the UK, much more than we've seen at any point since we joined the common market 50 years ago. And I do take that to be a very positive thing.
I must say, when I saw the current leaders of Australia, the United Kingdom and the United States, I couldn't help but think that, yes, one is a Conservative, one is a Labor leader, and one is, of course, a Democratic president. Personally, I prefer the flavour of FDR as the Democratic president, Churchill as the Conservative Prime Minister, and Curtin as the Australian Labor Prime Minister. But, I'm a black and white guy when it comes to those things. What did you think of AUKUS and about this important connection? It's the first time that the UK is sharing, and it's now the second time only that the United States has. And it also shows us that regardless of the politicians at the top, the connections between the three countries, rock solid.
Oh, absolutely. Alexander Downer, your former foreign minister, has put it beautifully. He said, after the Suez Crisis of 1956, those that ran the United Kingdom decided we were finished as a global power. We literally turned our backs on Australia, New Zealand, Canada, all those other parts of the world. We decided that our future was in Brussels with our next door neighbours in Europe. And then in terms of geopolitics, this is the UK's first step back on to the world stage, and it's highly appropriate that it's with Australia. And of course, you guys were the first to really wake up to the potential threat that China posed. So I think the fact that we're doing this, the fact the Americans are recognising the geographical significance and trustworthiness of Australia as an ally, I think all of that is good. The only but I would have is this should have happened, I think, 10 years ago, because by the time these submarines get delivered, and by the way, they'll be miles better than that rubbish the French were selling you, those old diesel subs, which are pretty useless in the modern world. I know Mr Macron hates the AUKUS deal, which is an even bigger reason for loving it.
Yeah,
but the problem is that by then, they probably will have taken Taiwan. So better late than never. But in terms of the global positioning of the UK and Australia, cementing that bond with America, regardless of what we think of Biden as president, I think we should all welcome what's happened in the last 24 hours.
Now, anyone who pays attention to UK news knows that there's been an explosion of attention about the bloke who hosts the football coverage and Match of the Day on the BBC's name is Gary Lineker, former striker, of course, for the England team, which means he's a venerated citizen, but he's quite a lefty and loves firing up, so he decided to bang out comparisons to 1930s Germany about the plan to do what we did in Australia, a decade ago, which was to stop the boats. Now, what I love about this, apart from all the cross lines of whether you like or don't like what he said as a BBC employee, I love that there has been more time spent talking about the tweet than the actual policy, which in and of itself you would think should be the week-long debate. Don't you think, Nigel?
Oh, yeah, it's been a wonderful distraction for people in that sense. I mean, look, to compare current cabinet ministers putting forward proposals belatedly to try and deal with this channel crisis, which I told them would happen 3 years ago. To compare them as individuals with Goebbels and the gang is, I think, the most disgraceful comparison and actually an insult in many ways to the victims of the Holocaust. So there's been a hell of a row. The BBC have backed down. It's game, set and match to Gary Lineker. The BBC has shifted ever further leftwards over the weekend. The really important point is that we are headed this year for maybe up to 100,000 young men to cross that 22-mile stretch of the English Channel, most of whom we've no idea what their backgrounds are. We know vast numbers of them are joining criminality, drugs gangs, I believe too posing a threat to national security. And somehow our match of the day soccer host, Gary Lineker, has stolen the whole of the debate. Let's see what happens. I'm delighted the government are finally listening, but I suspect that our link and relationship with the European Court of Human Rights in Strasbourg will make much of this unworkable. That's a battle to come, but it's a very, very, very humiliating few days for the BBC. They've given in to this man, and there's now going to be a real debate in this country, a proper debate for the first time, about the TV tax that we all have to pay to keep the left-wing BBC in the style to which they become accustomed.
Yeah, and I noticed when it comes to his own borders and his own security, there's a giant fence around Gary Lineker's house, but you can't have one around your country, apparently. Thank you, mate. Do appreciate it. GB News, lots of freedom there, and you can, of course, see Nigel there each and every day, get his podcast as well and watch it on Flash.